Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Dr. I. Sujarwati MPD as the lecturer of the subject, the research methodology, and we are from group 6. We are going to present about research question, and my group consists of 4%, and the first person is me. My name is Aulia Machfiroh as the first speaker, Amanda Putri Salsabila as the second speaker, and Dalilatul Khasanah as the third speaker, and the last is Ira Dwi Handayani as the last speaker. So let's begin this presentation with the first material. The first is definition of research question. A research question is a specific inquiry which the research seeks to provide a response to. Research question should indicate that practical experience, critical appraisal of the scientific literature, or interest in an untested theory was the basis for the generation of a research idea. So, research question harus berdasarkan dengan pengalaman praktis yang nyata, dan ini harus membuktikan bukti dalam sebuah teori yang belum terbuktikan. And the next material is types of research question. The first is descriptive. Descriptive research question is public opinion polls that seek only to describe the proportion of people who hold various opinions are primarily descriptive in nature. This is the type of research question for the quantitative research. They simply aim to describe the variable you are measuring. So they start with words such as how much, how often, what percentage, and what proportion. And the second is relational. Relational research questions as types of questions that seek to assess the relationship between two or more variables or groups. And the last is causal, cause and effect questions. This design is to determine whether one or more variables causes or affects one or more outcome variables.
So I will continue the material, and it is about the component of the research question. In research question, you can find the two main components, that is the FINER acronym and the PICO-TS framework. But first, I will explain the FINER acronym first, and then I will explain the PICO-TS one. So in the FINER acronym has five considerations in writing the research question. The first one is feasible. It means the ability of the investigator to carry out, and it should be backed by an appropriate number of subjects and methodology, as well as time and found to reach the conclusion. The second one is interesting, and interesting it is the essential that one has a real grounded interest in one's research questions, and one can explore this and back it up with the academic and intellectual debate. This interest will motivate one to keep going with the research question. And the next one is novel. The question should not simply copy question investigated by the other workers, but should have scope to be investigated. It may aim at the confirming or refuting that already established findings, establish new fact, or find some new aspect of the established fact. It should show the imagination of the researchers. The fourth one is ethical. This is the foremost requirement of any research question, and this is the mandatory to get the clearance from appropriate authorities before starting the research on the question. Further, the research question should be such that it minimizes the risk of the harm to the participants in the research, protect the privacy and maintain their confidentiality, and provide the participant right to withdraw from research, and should also guide in avoiding the practice in research. And the last one is the relevant. The question should of the academic and intellectual interest to people in the field you have chosen to study. The question preferably should arise from issues raised in the current situation, literature, and in practice. It should establish a clear purpose for the research in relation to the chosen field. For example, like filling a gap in knowledge, acknowledging academic assumption for or professional practice, monitoring a development in practice, and comparing different approach or testing theories with a specific population are some of the relevant research questions. And this is the question sample of the FINER framework. And for the feasible, it is, does the study have the relevant expertise? An interesting one is the research question interesting to the research? The novel one, does it address some shortcoming of the literature? And ethical has the example, can the research study obtain ethical approval? And the last one is relevant. Is the research question relevant to the literature? The next one is the PICO-TS. A clinical research question should follow the PICO-TS framework, which identifies the foundation of a research study. This framework is widely used in clinical research to explicate research questions. However, manuscripts seldom mention their research question in PICO-TS format explicitly. The major benefit of using this framework comes from knowing that journal reviewers look for the PICO-TS when considering the clarity and impact of the research question. Moreover, without a careful consideration of the research question, the study's methodology quality may be adversely influenced. So, the mean of the PICO-TS has the 6 components, that is the population that identify the population of focus, the agability criteria for selecting a sample from the population, and other features that define the population of interest. The second one is intervention. Identify the therapy, treatment, or approach that is reflect of the primary objects of the research study. And C is comparison. Identify the therapy, treatment, or approach that the intervention will be compared within the research study. And O, identify the measure, survey instruments, biological variable that will be documented during the study. T, or time, identifying the duration of the study. This component is optional depending on the context and the object of the study. And the last one is the setting. Setting, identify the study location. This component is optional because many studies can occur in multiple institutions, nation, or jurisdiction. And this is the example of the PICO-TS. So I have a paragraph of the example of PICO-TS. I will read it for you. For example, for women between age 20 and 45 at a woman-only homeless shelter in Mississauga, on Canada, and who are victims of intimate partner violence in the past year. Thus, principle-centered therapy increased score on the general belongingness scale over 8 weeks. So, how you can find the PICO-TS? So, the P1 is the woman, age 20 range to 45, who were victims of the intimate partner violence in the past year. And I was principle-centered therapy. C is baseline or before versus the principle-centered therapy or after. O is general belongingness scale. time is 8 weeks, and the setting is a woman-only homeless shelter in Mississauga on Canada. The next one is brainstorm or concept map for formulating the research question. The first one is identify what type of the studies have been done in the past. The second one is there has a unique area that yet to be investigated, or is there any particular question that may be worth replicating? The third one is the begin to narrow the topic by asking open-ended question, for example like how and why questions. And the fourth one is evaluate the question. The fifth one is develop a hypothesis, and the last one is write down the research question. And how you can writing down the research question? Research question state the question is by your own word, and research questions have to write down as completely as possible.
The next materials is about how to develop a research question. First, begin by identifying a broader subject of interest that lends itself to investigate. Jadi kita harus mulai dengan mengidentifikasi subjek minat atau pertanyaan lebih umum dahulu. Contohnya, faktor-faktor apakah yang berhubungan dengan minat baca seorang siswa? And then, do preliminary research on the general topic. Selanjutnya kita harus melakukan penelitian pendahuluan tentang topik umum yang sudah kita ambil tadi untuk mengetahui penelitian apa yang sudah dilakukan. Jadi kita bisa melihat dari research sebelumnya yang membahas tentang topik yang serupa. And then, what do you still need to know? Apa yang masih perlu kita ketahui dari topik kita? Ini menjurus ke specific questions. And therefore, what are the implied questions? To need to know about a problem will lead to few implied questions. Jadi setiap pertanyaan umum tuh harus mengarah kepada pertanyaan lebih spesifik. Misalnya tadi general questionnya, faktor-faktor apakah yang berhubungan dengan minat baca seseorang siswa. Nah, kita bisa membuatnya lebih spesifik, yaitu menjadi apakah hubungan antara pendidikan orang tua dan dengan minat baca seorang siswa. And next, narrow the scope and focus of research. Mempersempit ruang lingkup dan juga fokus penelitian. And once questions has been framed, one should evaluate it. Research question ini kan sudah dibentuk tadi, jadi kita harus mengevaluasinya terlebih dahulu. Ini untuk menyadari apakah research question ini sudah tepat atau masih perlu direvisi lagi. Evaluasi yang dapat kita lakukan antara lain, is the research question clear, is the research question focus, is the research question complex, is the research question researchable, or etc. And the next is create hypothesis. After formulating a research question, think where research is likely to be progressing. And the last is understand implication of your research. Jadi kita harus mengetahui apakah seorang itu berhasil mengisi kesenjangan dalam pengetahuan dan bagaimana hasil penelitian memiliki implikasi yang praktis. And the next is example of research question. As I explained earlier, that we have to start with general questions, then make it more specific. For example, like the general questions, what factors are related to student achievement in the field of English? And from these general questions, we can make it even more specific, which is to be, is the student's achievement in the field of English related to the level of formal education of English teacher? Or maybe, are student achievement in English related to their TOEFL or IELTS score English teacher?
The next material is about bad criteria of research question. The first is very narrow. It means the question that can be answered with yes or no should also typically be avoided. For example, does the use of minimal pairs is effective for improving pronunciation ability for student? Kenapa research question tersebut dikatakan buruk? Karena research question tersebut dapat diselesaikan hanya dengan jawaban yes or no. The second is unfocused. This question is so broad the research methodology would be very difficult, and the question is too broad to be discussed in a typical research paper. For example, does the use of minimal pairs is effective for improving pronunciation ability? The research question seperti itu dikatakan buruk karena tidak ada fokus kemana research question tersebut tertuju. The last is very objective. This question may allow the researcher to collect data but does not lend itself to collecting data that can be used to create a valid argument because the data is just factual information. The next material is about good criteria of research question. The first is less narrow. This question is more specific, will lead to more meaningful research, and the result would provide the opportunity for an argument to be forward. Jadi pertanyaan yang lebih spesifik akan mengarah pada penelitian yang lebih bermakna. Second is more focused. This question has a very clear focus for which data can be collected, analyzed, and discussed. The third is more subjective. This is a more subjective question that might lead to the formation of an argument based on the result and analysis of the data. And the last is more objective. This question is more complex and requires both investigation and evaluation, which will lead the research to form an argument that may be discussed. It is interesting and relevant. For example, how is the effectiveness of using minimal pairs for improving pronunciation ability of 11th grade student in Senior High School Muhammadiyah 1 Metro? Research question tersebut dapat dikatakan spesifik, fokus, dan merupakan pertanyaan yang kompleks karena arah dan tujuan pertanyaan sudah cukup jelas dan akan mengarah pada penelitian yang lebih bermakna. Okay, that's all our explanation. Thanks for your nice attention and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.